All right, it's about 6:03 here, and we are excited to get started here on our second installment of CIM University. The CIM University, for those of you guys who haven't joined us before, is an important educational resource for our runners as they embark on the road to CIM. We were with you guys last month talking about the nuts and bolts of training for a marathon, preparing for a marathon. We had a great discussion, a great panel with some of our coaches. And tonight, the topic that we're talking about is fueling and hydration, which is a super important topic just in general for runners. But it is an absolutely critical topic when you start talking about having a successful marathon. And we know we've got so many of you guys that are deep in your marathon training right now, and fueling and hydration is such an important topic. And so we're excited to work through that here in CIM University, number 2 of the fall. Of course, we're with you every month, and this is our second installment. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Scott Abbott. I'm the executive director of the Sacramento Running Association. And the Sacramento Running Association is the organization that puts on the California International Marathon. And we take great pride in making sure that the CIM is this important, or this great platform for achievement for all runners, whether you're trying to run your first marathon or your fastest. We really take great pride in making sure that it is a great platform for achievement. And a big part of that is providing the runners with the best possible resources. And we pride ourselves on working with best-in-class partners to make sure that we have those great resources for you guys, especially in the fueling and hydration space. We've got, like I said, best-in-class partners. GU and Noon have been great partners of ours over the year to provide great resources on course, but also in the training leading up to the marathon in fueling and hydration. And they're a big part of our panel here tonight. We've got this great panel of sports nutrition experts that are ready to talk fueling and hydration in general in training, but also before, during, and after your marathon race. So it's a great topic. But before we dive in, I want to go through a few administrative items. We're obviously here on Zoom. It's a great platform for topics like this to talk through and to invite panelists from all over to give you guys some information. Obviously, everybody is on mute. We ask you to stay on mute. And I will kind of facilitate a conversation with our panel to talk about fueling and hydration. But we also want it to be as interactive as possible with a group this large. We want you guys to be able to ask questions. The best way to ask questions is to type them into our chat. And as those questions come up, if they fit into what we're talking about, we'll get those questions answered. Otherwise, we definitely will set aside time, 15 minutes at the end, to answer questions that you guys have. Another way you can ask questions is next to your name, there's a virtual raise hand function. If you raise your hand, we'll be able to see that you've got a question. And when it's appropriate at the end, we'll call on you and you can ask your question of the panel. Also, this CIM University is going to be recorded, and we will load it up on our SRA YouTube page. We'll post that on the website and also on our social media accounts. So you'll have access to this in case you got to go to the bathroom or you miss portions of it. It will all be there on YouTube. And if you have questions, maybe that you think of after or that don't get answered tonight, you can always post them in the comments of the YouTube, and we'll do our best to get those answered for you as well. So we are ready to roll. Like I said, we have got a great panel of experts here tonight from some of our best-in-class partners to talk fueling and hydration as you guys get ready for the California International Marathon. So I'm going to introduce our panel. We'll allow them to basically introduce themselves because, like I said, it's a great panel with a lot of great experience and background from our sports nutrition experts. Let's start with, in my upper right here on my panels here, Yvette Waters. Yvette, welcome to the panel, and do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here tonight. I am Yvette Waters. I'm the nutrition strategist and brand influencer for Rayleigh's. Fancy way of saying I'm the corporate registered dietitian. So for the folks who don't necessarily know who Rayleigh's is, we are a family-owned regional grocery store chain that's in the Northern California, Northern Nevada region. And we are based out of Sacramento. And I actually have my background is as a sports dietitian working in retail. So this is obviously a huge passion project for mine always. And so I oversee all the nutrition strategy, but also SE Health, which has registered dietitians available for folks for free to work with when it comes to different services. So excited to be here.
Thank you, Yvette. Welcome. And then next, Roxanne.
Awesome. Thank you also everyone for having me tonight. I'm Roxanne Vogel. I work for GU Energy Labs as the Nutrition and Performance Research Manager. It's a fancy way of saying I get to work in R&D to develop new products. I also work with our sponsored athletes to help them with all of their nutrition and training needs for events. And I also run our on-site performance lab, so conducting research both internally on products and external collaborations with universities. I'm a nutrition researcher, so I'm currently getting my PhD in nutrition and exercise physiology in Australia, obviously remotely right now. But also in my spare time, I enjoy ultra running. So this is also a big part of my lifestyle. And I just love sharing knowledge and training tips with people to help them perform their best.
Awesome. Thank you, Roxanne, and welcome. And finally, Vishal.
Thanks, Scott, for having me, and excited to be here. I'm Vishal Patel. I'm the Director of Product Development at Noon Hydration. I am a runner myself and a CIM veteran on the relay a few years back. My background is in nutritional sciences and chemistry. And at Noon, I essentially do R&D, product innovation, and do a lot of our clinical research as well. A big runner. Marathon is kind of my focus right now, so excited to talk hydration with everyone here.
Great. Thank you, Vishal, and welcome. So guys, what we're going to really do here is we're going to start by talking nutrition and fueling and hydration in the most general sense around our training and just create a baseline for that. And then we're going to kind of, as we go, we'll get the panel, we'll start to focus them a little more specifically on the race weekend and the really specific things that you can do to fuel from the fueling and hydration standpoint to ensure you've put yourself in the best position to be successful on race day. So again, let's start just talking generally about nutrition for runners, especially those in training for a marathon. I think there's so much info out there about healthy eating and diets, but it's really important when our runners are in really a heavy training to kind of look at fueling optimally. And maybe Yvette, let's start with you to just kind of talk about what does that look like in general as runners are trying to fuel properly while they're training in heavy marathon training.
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, we get asked it all the time. And there's tons of information out there. So I'll go like pretty high level overview of it. But obviously, like the main goals that we're going to focus in on is making your marathon a good experience. That's the most important thing. Focusing in on avoiding injury as much as possible and also performing to your best of your capabilities. And nutrition has obviously the biggest focus of that when it comes to also fluid balance, things like that. So there's a couple of like tips and tricks when it comes to high level, when it comes to carbs versus fat versus protein. Those are all the macronutrients. So those are the ones that are going to give you the energy, the calories in your body to be able to get going and really perform at your best. And especially for endurance runners, you're in a really, really high aerobic state for long periods of time. So the strongest focus is, I would say, is always is with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates talked about a lot right now, but when it comes to high endurance training and training for something such as a marathon, you're looking at about 50 to 70% of your diet coming from carbohydrates. And and there's a lot of different forms of carbs, but this is really focusing on quality carbohydrates. And this is starting right now as you're leading up to your race with the whole grains and cereals, starchy vegetables. So you're focusing on like potatoes, sweet potatoes, but also peas, the squashes, a lot of fruits, and then legumes and dairy products. The reason why you're looking for the carbs is because you want to be able to replenish the amount of stored carbohydrates that go into your muscles, which is called glycogen. And when you start training and you're going hard, that's when glycogen depletion happens in your muscles. And that's when you're going to start to get fatigued, tired, and start to kind of decrease your performance. So you want to have as much glycogen in your body as possible. And that's coming from those carbohydrates. So then there's also really focusing in on protein. And that's what's going to help you to build and repair your muscle tissue. Muscle tissue it starts to get impacted, especially with running long distances. And so the protein is going to help to recover for you. And you want to keep yourself in a positive protein balance. So there's a couple tips when it comes to starting your day with protein. When you're having your meals, going about 25 to 35 grams of protein. And then there's a specific amino acid that you're looking for, especially as an athlete, and it's the amino acid that's in protein, which is leucine. That's usually in dairy products, it's usually meat and eggs. It also can be in plant-based proteins, just not as much. So you just might want to supplement or have a little bit more of. So you're focusing on lots of carbs, moderate protein, and then when it comes to fat, you do still want to have fat, because it is important for absorbing your fat-soluble vitamins, your vitamin A, D, E, and K. It is important for long-term energy, but you just don't want to go fully overboard, because can cause like GI distress. But you want to focus on those healthy fats and have about 20 to 25% daily intake. And when I say healthy fats, you're like looking for olive oil, flaxseed, avocados, nuts and seeds, nut butters, and fatty fish. So keeping it really going balanced, starting by heavier carbohydrate, moderate protein, make sure you have protein right after your run, and then a good amount of healthy fat is a really great start.
That's great. That's some great information there. I'm frantically taking notes, obviously a runner myself, but the 50 to 70% carbs, that's where our energy comes from. Obviously the protein for the recovery and eating that after. And then obviously the importance of fat too, especially healthy fats. Diving back into the carbs a bit, and maybe Roxanne, you can jump in here. I know that the fueling is a big part of this, and the carbohydrates is a way where we can get a lot of that fuel and energy. And sometimes we have runners that are, especially in training, they're on the go, or they're looking for that energy on the run. I know that they'll walk into health stores or running specialty stores, and there's just a wall of products that are these kind of quick carbs. Maybe Roxanne, you can kind of talk about ways where you can use some of those products to kind of fulfill those carbohydrate needs in training.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in touching on some of the, I guess, sports nutrition products, or that end of the spectrum, so things that are specifically formulated to be fast absorbing, be easy on the gut, and provide predominantly just carbohydrates for energy for people who are active and exercising. Usually these are going to be some kind of combination of carbohydrate sources, say from glucose or fructose, or maltodextrin even. So this combination of these different types of sugars actually helps your body absorb carbohydrates more effectively, especially when you're exercising. So when you're exercising, your blood flow is really being redirected to the working muscles. So it's not going necessarily as much to your gut. So it makes things harder to absorb. And so that's why a lot of the sports nutrition products you'll see are kind of simpler carbohydrates that are broken down again, and blends of carbohydrates and sugars that are easy to digest. So, these can be in the forms of bars, they can be drink mixes, sports drinks, they can be things like gels, energy gels, which we make. Even the little gummy chews now are pretty popular for runners to take with them on longer runs. And so any of these are going to be useful as sort of a quick and easy to digest energy source, whether it's immediately before your training or maybe during training, and sometimes even after training along with your protein if that's necessary, instead of having access to whole foods. But the key here is really just kind of filling in the gaps where maybe your whole foods diet isn't really meeting those carbohydrate needs, or specifically during exercise when you need something that's easier to digest than like a sandwich. You're not going to take that on your run. But the rule of thumb for during exercise would be about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour of activity. And that's generally starting after you've passed that 1 hour threshold. That's when you need to really start considering replacing those carbohydrates during your workout. Anything up to an hour, you could get by with just an electrolyte drink or something like that, or maybe just a little sports drink. But once you get into those longer runs, especially as you get into higher volume training weeks, it's probably a good idea to start considering some of the sports nutrition options. And especially since you'll probably be using them on race day, it's a really good idea to practice with what you think you'll be using come race day.
That's great. Vishal, maybe piggyback on that a little bit, just on specifically on the hydration side of things. Where does hydration come in on the general diet and fueling plan for runners in training? Obviously, just throughout the day, what's the best way for athletes to hydrate, and how much should they be drinking?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, hydration, you can argue, is probably the most important thing you can do from a day-to-day basis, to help you kind of just perform the best, train the best, recover the best. And oftentimes that daily hydration will get neglected, especially, in kind of where many people are still working from home and it's virtual. So it can be harder to stay on top of your fluid needs. But, we recommend, drinking kind of electrolytes and fluids really all throughout the day. Typically, as a general rule of thumb, and it does vary from individual to individual and will change as you increase your training. But if you take your weight in pounds and divide that by 2, that's roughly how many ounces your baseline you should shoot for per day. So if you weigh 150 pounds, about 75 ounces would be your baseline of what you want to aim to drink at every day. I always tell people that, monitor your hydration status. The quickest, most effective way is by just monitoring your urine color throughout the day. So anything that's kind of too clear, you're probably overdoing it, or you're not absorbing the fluid that you're consuming. Or anything that's a little bit, too yellow, you're not drinking enough. So that's kind of where the role of electrolytes come into play. And, with Noon, we have, a range of products. Our lemon lime endurance product is what you'll primarily want to use in training, as that's what's going to be offered on race day. But throughout the day, it's still important to take in electrolytes, as it's going to help you absorb the water and the fluid more effectively, and will help kind of top off those electrolyte stores that you may be using later on in the run, or recovering from the morning workout or whatnot.
Great. Thank you. So we've got, kind of our general, markers there for hydration, and just kind of those general fuel markers. We talked about those macronutrients. And Yvette, I'm going to come back to you before we dive into the hyper specific parts of the race. Maybe you can describe like what a good typical plate looks like for runners in training for kind of their typical meal, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, in terms of breaking down those macros and in the most practical sense of what would a good plate look like for a runner.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I have like a perfect slide for it, but it's not physically in my hand to show it. But half of your plate should be with really good high qualities like fruits and vegetables is always great, because you're getting carbohydrates leading up, keeping up with the dietary fiber. You're getting dietary fiber in there, but you're also getting vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Your body, when you're training really hard and this high intensity, it's putting your body in a lot of stress. And so having that hydration, having that sleep, and also having those antioxidants that are coming from those fruits and vegetables are going to help keep your body more in balance, you can say. So having about half your plate with the fruits and vegetables, about a quarter of your plate with like higher quality proteins. And when I say like higher quality proteins, that's kind of focusing in on things like having the eggs, the fattier fish, but poultry, chicken, tuna, but also if you are plant-based or vegetarian, having like tofu or beans and lentils, legumes, having those as your protein sources. And then the healthier type of fats, like having a little bit of nuts and seeds or some like Greek yogurt on the side, having just a little bit of that with some good quality. Your other side of your plate should be some like whole grains in there. So half fruits and vegetables, good quality protein, good quality carbs, and then a little bit of healthy fat on the side is a really good tool and nice like visualization of your plate every meal.
Great. That's awesome. My plate doesn't look like that, but I can strive for it, hopefully. Now, Roxanne, in terms of just the realistic standpoint here, we're going to have people that are getting up, trying to get an early run in, or are kind of maybe squeezing in a run right after work. What are, obviously, having a plate like Roxanne just described, it may not be a reality for all 3 meals of the day. What are some ways, especially in the morning, like if we're doing your long runs in the morning, like how much fuel should we have before we run? And what are some ways where you guys think that we can get kind of some quick, nutrition and fuel before workouts, kind of like, and maybe it's more kind of on the snack side of things, they can kind of bridge the gap between those, good quality meals.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I always get from especially runners. It seems like, because you need something that's going to sit really easily in the stomach because it's being jostled around with every step that you're out there running. And usually my response is twofold. It's one, it really depends on the person and what they are accustomed to and really comfortable digesting and eating before workouts. And then the other part of it is, how early before your run or how long before your workout do you have to digest those foods? So from the time perspective, the longer you have, the probably bigger the meal can be, and maybe the more complex it could be. So maybe it's just not a bowl of oats, but it might be like an egg or two on top of that. If you have, say, 3 or 4 hours to digest versus if you have only an hour or two, it might be something more simple, say some cereal with some non-fat milk or plant-based milk alternative, and a piece of fruit or banana or something. So more predominantly carbohydrate, easy to digest, kind of a smaller portion. So maybe only a few hundred calories up to 500 calories, depending on how much time you really have to digest. Now, that being said, everybody's different. And there are some folks who can sit down and eat like a full plate of bacon and eggs and then go out and run. And not saying that that's the best strategy, but some people can do that. So, and that's, for morning people, a lot of folks are going to want to have their cup of coffee, which is usually perfectly okay if you're used to drinking coffee. Usually 1 to 2 cups is kind of the recommended amount before you go out and exercise, because you'll get that 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine, which research has shown can be beneficial for performance, especially endurance performance. And then I guess, if it's later in the afternoon, maybe you don't really have time to have a full meal before you go out and exercise, then you might be considering something smaller like a snack. Again, looking at that kind of few hundred to 500 at most calorie range and keeping it simple, predominantly carbohydrates. You could have some, crackers and nut butter, or some, fruit and some yogurt, or something pretty light and easy to digest. One of our favorites is to have Stroop waffles. So it's this little wafer-like cookie creation that has this gel kind of in between the 2 wafers. And that's a really light and easy snack to have on hand and just have before you go out. So.
Great. Kind of on that same side of things, maybe come back to you here, Yvette, on, you mentioned that the importance of protein in recovery. How quickly do you need to get protein, or should you get protein into your system after you work out or after a long run?
Yeah, absolutely. And just like Roxanne said, and it was perfectly said, it is very individualized. So figuring out what's really going to work for your body, because each of our bodies are going to work just a little bit differently. Oh, sorry, my got a web working from home, cat. But also just like, this is the time to figure it out. The one thing I would definitely say is not try and figure it out right before or on race day. But right after is when your body, it's pretty depleted, like a lot of impacts that's happening on your muscle cells. So you're wanting to recover and repair. So you want to start getting protein in within 60 minutes of it, like immediately after getting a decent amount of like starting to get some protein in, and even just a little bit of carbohydrates to replenish those glycogen stores are going to help your body start to recover faster. And it's also going to kind of help a little bit with the soreness that can start to occur as well.
And so, you say inside of an hour, sometimes people are driving out to go for a run or thinking about maybe some of these races that they might be doing leading up to CIM, where they run a hard half marathon, and it might be a while till they can, get somewhere where they can sit down and have a meal. What are some ways where they can kind of get that quick protein and maybe some quick fat in to kind of really help with that recovery process?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I always have like emergency snacks. Having snacks with you, whether it's in your bag, in your car, just having something readily available for you is really important, especially as you're doing these harder training sessions. So it is like with a higher quality protein bar if you can, or if it is a form of a protein shake. There are a lot of those out there, at least like anything, whether it's like Owens with it's plant-based or it's Orgain if it's dairy-based. That's where you're kind of looking to have ready to go. Or if you do a run and you're going into your car, maybe having a cooler packed with a couple of those in there and being able to get some of that food in. It's really going to be, it's a little bit more planning, but it's going to be beneficial for your performance overall, helping with that recovery. And then also if you are doing something dairy based, you're looking for that whey protein. There's whey and there's also casein protein that's in milk and dairy products. That whey protein is going to absorb a lot quicker in your body and then there's the casein, which is going to take a longer period of time. So if you have some cottage cheese or even just a little bit of cheese with you, a cheese stick with some crackers or crackers and the nut butters that's more shelf stable, having those will really kind of help to stabilize those blood sugars, also get some of that protein in there and working to recover and repair those muscles.
Great. Okay, let's, we could kind of talk about this stuff all day. I love it, but let's start to get to the race. Obviously, we're 10 weeks out. I can almost feel the anxiety from our runners here over here on the right side of my screen as they're getting ready for race day. And some of them have some big long runs coming up, which is a great time to really practice that in-race fueling and hydration plan and really hone it so they're ready for race day. You mentioned earlier 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. Let me go back to you, Roxanne. Let's just start with the race itself, and then maybe we'll work out to, hey, the meal before the race and the night before. But let's just start with the race plan itself. What are some fueling tips on the run during the marathon on how they can manage to get those 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates an hour?
Yeah, definitely. So, once you start, you really want to focus on, because for most folks who are going to be out there, it's going to be at least a few hours or more. You really want to start on your nutrition strategy pretty early on so that you stay ahead of it and you don't fall behind. And then, the other scenario is if you wait to start your nutrition until later and then things go south digestively, then you're way far behind, and it's really hard to catch up at that point. So I say, start early and start often. So maybe every 15 to 20 minutes, either try and sip something or eat something, whether that's a gel, whether that's one of the chew blocks, try to be putting something in your mouth. And with the number of aid stations, I think it says there's 17 out there, that's going to be pretty easy to do. So, maybe every time you go through an aid station, make an effort to be drinking something or eating something. So getting those 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates in per hour can look like 2 to 3 gels per hour, or 4 of those little chews are a serving. So you could do, 4 to 8 chews per hour, something along those lines. So whatever your plan is for getting that target number of carbohydrates, just make sure that you have that in your mind. So when you go through the aid station, we're going to be on course. So every 6 miles, there will be the gels and chews. Make sure you pick up what you need so that you can take it with you and know how you're going to carry that. And it's going to be maybe cold out there. It's December. So keep that in mind too when you have to think about how I'm going to open the package. Because I know when my fingers get cold, I'm like a T-Rex out there trying to tear open packages. So just all of these things that you can really practice and hone during your training is going to only help you come race day. So again, if you're looking at that 30 to 60 grams per hour, that's about 150 to 250 calories per hour. So like 2 to 3 gels per hour or a couple servings of chews per hour, and then making sure you're hydrating adequately along the way as well.
Yeah, and we're going to, in a second here, we're going to actually share, on our website, runcim.org, on the course information page, there's a tab where you can look at the aid stations and the nutrition offerings on course. I know that was a question somebody asked. Roxanne mentioned we got 17 aid stations. 4 of those aid stations will have nutrition added. We'll have our goo products. We'll also have some fruit as well. For the opportunity to get some of those carbohydrates. And while we're pulling that up here on the website, you can see that it has the flavor of Noon Endurance, which is going to be lemon lime, and then those 4 aid stations that are going to have nutrition. While we're looking at that, Vishal, Roxanne talked about the hydration part of it. Obviously, the race is in December. People are training in the summertime, but then the race in the fall when things are warm. But then we're getting into race day. It's going to be in December. Talk a little bit about hydration plays into it, especially maybe on a cold day when people might not be thirsty, but they've been hydrating during training. Can you kind of talk about that dynamic and how they can use these 17 aid stations to incorporate Noon and water into both their fueling, but then also maybe even a part of their fueling, their hydration, but also part of their fueling plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hydration and kind of that fueling do definitely go hand in hand. And like Roxanne kind of mentioned with fueling, starting early is the best. And that's the same thing with hydration. I mean, typically, we recommend aiming for around 16 to 21 ounces an hour. And I'll talk about how the environmental conditions will change that here in a second. And it's that consistency that's key. It's not waiting till the hour mark to try to take in that amount of fluid. So with all the aid stations and Noon essentially being at every single one of them, you'll have access to it very regularly. And I usually recommend every around 10 to 15 minutes to just pick up a cup and sip on it. I mean, everything that's inside of that cup is designed to help that fluid get into your system very quickly and help your body improve the water and electrolyte absorption. So it's not fuel. There is some carbohydrates and calories in there, but it's still really important to take in, like Roxanne said, all the fueling and the gels. Choose whatever your personal preference is. Staying consistent with what you've trained with is also really important. So yeah, right now it's probably a lot warmer than it's going to be on race day. And I've worked the Noon booth at CIM a few times, and I've been at the race and ran it once. And the year I ran it, it was warmer than I thought, actually, but it could be a little bit different for other folks. What I always tell people when it is the winter time, or you're running and it's a little bit cooler, is that your core temperature is still going to rise, and your body is still so when your core temperature rises, you need to cool it down. And the way your body cools itself down naturally is by sweating, and hydration helps with that too. So if it's hot out, your core temperature is going to rise and your body is going to need to cool itself down. If it's colder out, the layers that you're wearing and just your higher heart rate that's going to naturally occur is going to raise your core temperature. And oftentimes when the temperature drops, the air is a little bit drier and you're still losing fluid while you're breathing. And as I'm talking right now, it's not just via sweating. So I always tell people to stay true to the plan, practice while you're in training, aim for that, 16 to 21 ounces as a baseline. But really every 10 to 15 minutes trying to take in some fluid, especially because it's going to be available throughout the race course, which is going to be a nice benefit to have.
So Roxanne, going back to thank you, Vishal. How many grams of carbs are in one gel?
Great question. Yeah, generally they're going to be right around 20. So there's a range of about 21 to 23 grams, depending on the flavor variety.
So if you're looking at 30 to 60 an hour, that's almost 2 an hour. One every half hour to 45 minutes is kind of the bare minimum. So that could be hard, and that's great, but that's a lot more than I think you kind of count on. I think even especially performance runners. You think about you're running even a 3-hour marathon, that's going to be taking close to 6 gels over the course of that. And that's for a fast, on the faster end of things. People that are out there a lot longer. So maybe Yvette, you could talk about some other ways where people can get carbs in their system when they run. Some of those whole food options, like I said, on course, we will have fruit out there for runners, but if there's other things that they can maybe pack or if they can't tolerate gels, that many gels over the course of 4 or 5, even 6 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if you're going to pack it, just having the carbohydrates that are lower in fiber. I wouldn't have very much to any fiber on something like on training day. And this would be something to really, once again, it is individualized to you. So this would be a perfect time to start packing different options to really see what works best on your longer runs if you cannot handle as much goos and gels and blocks and things like that. So the best way that is very easy to take is something like some dried fruit. Well, not as much dried fruits. I would just say like fruits, like grapes are really great that I like to suck on when I'm doing a longer run. And so finding some different varieties of those things, if you want to, you can do something like a candy in a form to see if that kind of can help and just suck on and chew on while you're running. But it's really figuring out what's going to work best for you. I would never do something like a cracker or any type of vegetables or anything like that. There's just too much fiber and too much chewing involved. So really kind of just figuring out what's going to work for you. Take a walk down those aisles and seeing what some of those different options that are really nice, easily digestible. But I would go with fruit is usually the best and pretty easy to grab.
Yeah, that's good. And they should be looking for things that are just quick, simple carbs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No,
that's
no
all
fat,
you're really
no protein that are slower. Like peanut butter is not good because that's going to be slower, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's helpful. And just a reminder, she hit that there's 17 aid stations. They're roughly hit about every 2 miles. And then there's those 4 fueling stops that are attached to the aid stations that are going to have goos and fruit. And those are roughly every 6 miles. So as you kind of plan through that, 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour, 16 to 21 ounces of fluids per hour. And remember, you're getting about 4 to 5 ounces of fluid in that in the cup at each aid station. And so again, every 2 miles, there's going to be another aid station. So you can kind of do the math there and figure out what's appropriate for you. And definitely the important message there is start practicing this stuff now in your training so that you can have a system that's dialed in. So you're not doing something different on race day. That's rule number 1 of fueling and hydration. Whatever you've been doing in training, you have to do on race day. Don't try new things out there. So that's good. Now let's kind of work away from the race a little bit. Let's work back a little bit. Obviously, what they are eating the morning of the race, and that's kind of tricky. Obviously, it's something we want to practice for some of our weekend long runs coming up. But you're talking about a 7 o'clock start. that's probably like a 3 a.m. Alarm going off. I know I'm already getting people anxious right now just by talking about this. But that's getting on the bus maybe at 4:30 or 5 o'clock to go out to the start line, obviously using the restroom and kind of getting in there. What's the best way to kind of attack that morning to kind of set them up so their tank is full when they get into that race? Because a lot of that plan you guys laid out is great, but if you're starting on an empty tank, I think Vishal and Roxanne, you already mentioned it, you're kind of behind the 8 ball if you don't get going on it early. So what are some strategies that they can do race morning? I didn't really call on anybody. Roxanne, anybody want to dive in there? That would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of folks that I work with, the alarm goes off, they wake up, the first thing they do is have their hot beverage of choice, whether that's a tea or a coffee or whatnot. So you're starting your hydration process kind of first thing. And then having that meal that you've practiced before long runs. And so some options that have worked really well for people have included, things like oatmeal with some sliced banana or different type of fruit on there, rice cakes with some nut butters, or again, some more sliced fruit or banana on there, toast. If people have, kind of finicky stomachs and they're unsure of what to try, toast is usually a pretty safe bet. And then, for those who are very, very finicky stomachs, you might even consider like sipping on a sports drink as you're getting ready and, getting to the car and going on your way to the start line, just because you're getting in the carbohydrates, you're getting in fluids, and at least it's something that's easy to digest and put down if you have those race day butterflies and you just don't really feel like eating anything solid. Sipping on a sports drink is always an option too.
Yeah, and then Vishal, to that point, what about the hydration needs that morning?
Yeah, I mean, right when you're waking up, coffee, tea, great obvious choices. You're gonna wake up some level of dehydrated, and that's okay. When you're sleeping, you're only losing fluid. You're not bringing it, consuming anything for the most part. So I always recommend, just right away, the morning of, right when you wake up, to either drop one of our sport tablets in there just to get some higher amounts of electrolytes in right away. But, just leading up, just bring a bottle with you, sip on it, just that consistent intake over those few hours, really just to top off your electrolyte and hydration stores. You're not trying to take in everything all at once. Leading up to it, you're practicing good hydration, good feeling, etc. So come race morning, just like you're training, you're just there to kind of execute. So just kind of the topping off those stores will be the key.
Yeah, and to that point, I think one thing that we don't think about is, in training, it's good. We can just kind of, do our little morning routine, drive to our run, and then step out the car and we're running pretty much. But that dynamic of being on the bus and then maybe being stuck in your maybe start crowd for 20 or 30 minutes beforehand, if your last fuel you had is, when you left your hotel or when you left your house, that could be an hour and a half, 2 hours before you ever start running. So it is, I would always say it's not even a bad idea to throw down a gel or something right in the start area, just to kind of top off those carbs. And like Vishal said, throw down some sport drink or something too, just to get a little carbs and some hydration in, so you're not starting on an empty tank and negating maybe some of that work you did 2-3 hours ago before you left the house, or having a little something on the bus as well. So just kind of think through that plan ahead. And I think that's really important, because you want to start well. Ultimately, my message to people is, obviously, if you're on this call, you're really serious about your performance at CIM. You're going to do the training, and if you show up in shape and you're healthy and you've done good work, you're set up to have a good race. Really, there's only 2 things that can derail that. One is poor pacing, which we'll talk about in our November CIM University. And then the other is not executing your fueling and hydration plan well. And so this is a really important topic, and it's been great. There's a couple things I want to hit before we jump into questions. But one is going back to you, Yvette. Let's go to the night before, day before. What are the things that, I think there's a lot of nervous energy that day before. sometimes people are in new places. They might be traveling here, looking for a restaurant or something. What's kind of that magic meal the night before, or the types of things they should be doing the day before the race?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, once again, kind of figuring out your plan of attack before even that week before the race, to really figure out what's going to work best for you. But I would even say starting off about 5 days before the race. You're not necessarily training as much, but really slowly increasing your carbohydrate intake in your meals. It's definitely outdated to load up the day before to carbohydrate load. So it's slowly increasing your carbohydrate even 5 days up in your meals will start to get those glycogen stores ready to go for your race day. And that's through like the pastas, potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, sandwiches, quinoa, grains, oatmeals. That's the way to really kind of start to add those in just more gradually. Then about 48 hours before, that's going to be your last big meal. And I would say that because it gives you ample amount of time to be able to fully digest and not feel necessarily bloated on race day. And that's where you can enjoy one of your favorites, like a really good pasta dish. Or if you do want maybe a pizza that's not necessarily highest in fat. So if you're creating your own, rice, potatoes, again, those are really good options to get those carbs in there and a good higher meal of like bigger meal. 24 hours, the night before, that's when obviously you're having a lot of jitters by that point. That's where you're going to want to figure out the meal that really worked best for you. And I would say figure that out over these next 10 weeks, figure out that meal that really works for you. That's not overly big, is lower in fiber, has some good quality carbohydrates in it, and definitely has some protein in it too, but lower in fat overall. So on your longer runs these next few weeks, really kind of figure out what your plate looks like. So the night before, you already know what you're going to go for, and you already have it planned out, so it's not creating that extra stress. And it might be the carbs. You might be looking for a sweet potato, a little bit of pasta, baked potato, rice, bagel, a banana. Those are good options. They're more easily digestible. They're lower in fiber. There's not necessarily a ton of fat in there. And then mixing with a good protein that isn't upsetting your stomach. That'll set you up pretty well.
Awesome. 5 days before it starts. That's really good. I had not heard that before. I'm old school and just doing the night before carbo load. And now I know why I've failed miserably many times before. So thank you for that. I mean, the 5 days before, that's great. Okay, we got about 10 minutes left. I definitely want to get to your guys' questions. A few of you guys have been throwing them in the chat. If you guys have questions, throw them up in the chat, or you can use the raised hand function and we'll get to you guys. And like I said, if you missed any of this, if you hopped in late, we are posting it on the website and on social media on our YouTube channel. You can also post questions in the comments there, and we'll try to get to those. A few of them I think we have answered just kind of through the conversation here, but a couple of ones that come up. One was just you guys talk a little bit about good alternatives for dairy for people who are lactose intolerant. Anybody want that?
I feel like this is an Yvette question.
I
Right?
was just gonna say, yeah. I think that's me. Yes, that's a super fair question, and there are some great milk alternatives out there. And so it's really what works best for your taste and what you're looking for. If you're needing the amount of protein that you're going to get in a dairy type of milk, that's where it's going to be soy. Soy is going to have the amount of protein. It has about 7 grams per 8 ounce as well. Then there's also almond milk. Almond has less protein in it, but it does have a good amount of carbs. If you're looking for hypoallergenic, so you're trying to stay away from a lot of those allergens, oat milk is a really great option. It also doesn't have tons of protein in it, but has a good amount of carbs, and it froths really well. So if you're gonna make it in with your coffee in the morning or something along those lines, it does blend and cream really well. And then I would just say, leading up, I would probably stay away from coconut milk right now, just because it tends to be a bit higher in fat. So there are a lot of those options. There's even nut-based ones. There's macadamia nut milks. There's cashew milks. There's a lot of different options out there. So taking a look at O'Reilly's But in trying out some of those different ones, there's a lot of different creamers out there that are no longer dairy-based as well. There's nut pods, ones that are nut-based, and those are really great options for you as well. And you're going to get some of those good carbohydrates in there.
Great. This is probably a good one for Vishal and Roxanne. You might be able to jump in too. I think it's a great question. During the race, can you get by with getting your carbs exclusively from electrolyte and carbohydrate drinks, or do you need to be eating gels, chews, or whole foods? You know, and I know there's a lot of products out there, but you know, given what's on our race course, is it adequate to get by on just electrolyte and carbohydrate drinks?
Yeah, you know, based on kind of, you know, what's going to be available on race day. And, you know, even my personal opinion is to separate the hydration and the fueling, just so you have a little bit more flexibility to play with in what you want to fuel with. You know, noon endurance, it does have carbohydrates and calories, but it's not enough to provide you know, the carbohydrate, you know, energy and oxidation that you're looking for to help you with, you know, a long distance race like a marathon. So strictly use you know, the noon endurance and the hydration component just for that, just to help your body improve water absorption, get in electrolytes, and improve fluid balance.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. Just from my own personal, I mean, that's one of the things I think that it gets under utilized, is just getting adequate number of carbs to really fuel your body, getting them early and getting them often, and trying to get those 30 to 60 grams per hour. And I don't think you know, you're going to get enough of that through with just electrolyte drinks. And that's why this conversation happening in September is so important. It allows you guys to start to experiment with things and find out what works for you. It's good to know what's on our course, but if what works for you isn't what's on our course, you guys can learn that now and pack that, but start to kind of find it. And companies like GU have so many different types of product, you know, that they've started to learn that, like, yeah, gels don't work for everyone. That's where the blocks come in, and the waffles and other things. So definitely, I would encourage people to kind of find that and experiment with that in training. Actually, staying here, there's another one for you, Vishal. For hydration, can you take in too many electrolytes? Should you be alternating water and noon while on the course, or is it okay to just go straight noon all the way through?
Yeah, you know, I would recommend just taking straight noon all the way through the race. You know, water is great, you know, but it's not going to hydrate you as effectively as what you need when you're exercising. So you really need, you know, electrolytes to help with the absorption, and a little bit of carbohydrate to act like the transporter. So I would recommend, I wouldn't worry about overdoing electrolytes, you know, when you're running a marathon or you're training for one. Just take in the noon and practice it, and you'll be good to go.
These are two highly specific questions, which is fine. That's what's great about questions from everybody. We want to be interactive, but we're getting asked. I'll just throw them together. There's two specific products that are being asked about, and it might be you, Yvette. One is Payday candy bars, which I get that. That's interesting because it's got the nuts and salt and also the protein and carbs all together. And the other one's Vegemite, so which I don't know a ton about. So I'll let you guys take those two, Payday and Vegemite.
Great. Yeah. Paydays. I'm going to be honest. I don't know a ton about Vegemite, but I can find a little bit more. And maybe Roxanne, Vishal, you might know a little bit more about Vegemite, but definitely for Payday and candy bars and leading up, those can be really great. It's just, once again, figuring out what works for you. I would probably stick with the more snack size one. I wouldn't go full candy bar. And it also kind of depends when you're going to have it too, if you're having it along with your meals, but I would not have it necessarily on race day, just because when you are running and things like that, and the nuts, trying to chew something like that, in my mind, it can be a little bit more of a choking hazard with everything else going on. So it's more enjoying that as your meal, or as a little bit of a sweet treat, or before, but maybe not during exercise.
I'll jump
Great.
on the Vegemite one just because I started my PhD in Australia and I came to know and love Vegemite when I was there. But to be honest, so it's a salty, it's kind of like a spread, and most folks will put it on their toast or whatever, but like a very thin spread. You don't use a lot of it. It does have B vitamins, which is nice for energy production during exercise. And I guess if you got tired of having sweet things on race day, you could consider maybe having like a little portable Vegemite packet, but it's not going to give you energy from carbohydrates necessarily. It's low calorie. It's mostly just a condiment, but it is definitely a change of flavor and it has some B vitamins. So I'd say if you practice with it and you like it and it works for you, then it can't probably hurt.
Okay, and I think we kind of talked about this before, but just asking about those snacks between meals for carb loading, those kind of carby snacks. And actually someone else asked about pretzels as a snack while running. So maybe this is maybe revisiting that topic about just those good things that can be snacked on kind of between the meals for carbs and fuel and energy, but then even also addressing specifically pretzels as one of those potentially even while running.
Yeah, I would say pretzels while running, as long as you can feel like you can suck on them and you're not going to necessarily choke. They're really great option. They're nice. I like to suck on them a lot when I'm running because I like to suck on the salt, and it's also easily digestible. It's something to kind of take my mind off the situation at hand. So I actually enjoy having pretzels, and they are great. They're a really good source for carbohydrates for you and what you're kind of looking for, and they are easily digestible. So those are a really great option. And when you're looking for those for snacks, you can have and since those are shelf stable and things, those are really good emergency snacks. You can always have a little bit of nut butter with them. You can have some cheese with them. So that's on the days when you're practicing dinner in between. So you're mixing your pretzels along with some different type of proteins, or if you're going to have some hummus or guacamole, they're a really great way to have those. And then when it comes to like other type of snacks, having just fruits at hand with you when it comes to obviously like bananas, oranges, apples, peaches, right now, not as much longer, but any of those kind of things that that you can just grab there. Those are quick carbohydrates ready to go for you. Creating your own trail mix is also another great way. You can get a lot of good healthy fats in there, adding some pumpkin seeds, things like that, some dried fruits for the carbohydrates, and some different kind of chocolates, things like that. It's a really good way to just have on hand, and some good snack options that have the carbs in it too.
Yeah. Okay. This is a question, and I was surprised it came so late because we get it every time we do one of these. People are always asking about salt tablets. And maybe Vishal talk a little bit about maybe how that interacts with Noon, whether those are necessary if you're drinking the Noon, or if some other sport drink works for people. But just maybe you guys talk. We don't offer salt tablets on course. Our medical team doesn't offer them either. Just to be clear, they're not going to be offered on course. But that's something that's kind of been out in the marathon lore for many years, is salt tablets. Can you guys address that? Maybe start with you, Vishal, on that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my opinion on salt tablets is that, you don't need them if you're, consuming, like a sport drink or a product that has electrolytes in there. And then, typically what you're eating from a fuel standpoint will have some supplementary sodium or electrolytes as well. The thing with salt tablets, depending on which ones you use, I guess, is they're pretty much just really high in sodium and chloride, which, don't get me wrong, those are very important electrolytes, but getting the right balance of sodium to chloride to potassium to water is really the key. So you need to have any sort of electrolyte product be effective. You still need water, and that ratio is what's going to help with the optimal absorption. So I don't personally believe that you need them if you are drinking Noon and you're taking them, as that is, having a more hydration solution in a cup is the more efficient way to take in electrolytes.
And the follow-up, or does anybody else have any thoughts about salt tablets, just because it is always such a hot topic, Roxanne or Yvette?
I'll jump on it really quick just because we do, as a company, make electrolyte capsules. And so, the way we position it is for those very extreme, maybe it's a super hot and humid race environment, and it's just like you have really increased electrolyte needs even above and beyond kind of what you can get through your drink mix or whatever you're having on course. That would be kind of the time and the place if you were to use them. So.
And there was a follow-up to that, Vishal and or any of you guys, because I know this is a new trendy one, which is pickle juice. Have you guys heard that? Is that one that, I mean, I get it too, because I think there's obviously a little bit of salt that's in there as well. What's your experience there? Is that something that could work? Is that necessary?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I haven't tried any pickle juice. I've heard it, in the endurance hydration community for years and years. It does provide a source of sodium, and sometimes there's different, nutrients within pickle juice that some people believe helps your body with cramping or the prevention of cramping and things like that. My take on that is more balanced electrolytes within a solution. So it's more than just sodium. Having the right blend with water is ideal. But I know some people swear by it, and it works for some. Typically, we take the more kind of all around sport drink approach to it.
And just addressing that issue of cramping, just so from a race standpoint, on course, we're also going to have at all of our aid stations. We do have a homeopathic product called Highlands. They're also one of our partners. We've had that out every year at races. I would not recommend using that if you haven't tried it in training. But cramping also, I mean, it's definitely connected to hydration and fueling, but it's also a lot of times it's due to muscle fatigue. So a lot of cramping comes in from poor pacing, being undertrained. So if you're prepared and you pace effectively, and then you're fueling and hydrating properly, you're going to be able to, I think, avoid the cramping and not need all of these kind of magic tricks late in the race that people are trying to find, salt tablets and pickle juice and all that other stuff. So we had a question, and maybe just like a rules question, but also it kind of could lead into another one. We have a first-time marathoner who just wondered if you're supposed to, when you're eating your fuel on course, whether you need to stop. From a rule standpoint, no, you're obviously going to eat and run, and we would encourage that if you can. But maybe talk a little bit about, Roxanne, you mentioned it earlier, the mechanism of it, especially when you're taking those gels. Also, if it's a cold day and the hands are cold or whatnot. And also with the hydration piece, like, do you want to be drinking to help that the gels or the solid foods go down, or is that going to be something that's going to upset your stomach? Do you want to kind of separate those? Should you kind of take a gel maybe a few minutes before an aid station coming up, and then you can kind of wash it down with some, but maybe talk about the mechanisms of kind of getting that fuel in while you're running.
Okay.
Yeah, so we definitely recommend, hydrating along with your gels. That's how they're meant to be taken. And whether you want to sip while you take your gel, maybe take a sip and take a little bit off of the gel packet and then another sip, or you want to drink before you take the gel, or drink after, or before and after. Okay. No matter how you want to do it, the point is you want to try to get, at least 4 to 8 ounces in with each gel, just to help with the digestion absorption. And that holds true also for more solid forms, say like the chews, the little gummies, or even if you're eating something solid, like the question was getting at there, it's going to help kind of get those nutrients into your system more effectively, and just wash it down. So there's always somewhat of a choking hazard if you're running and trying to eat solids. So maybe slow down your pace a little bit. But if you've practiced during training and you feel comfortable chewing while on the run, then by all means. And
then we'll make this the last question, because we're kind of coming up against it. We went a little bit over, but these have been some great questions, and you guys have provided such good information. Before this last question, I do want to take this opportunity to thank our panel. You guys have done a great job. In fact, if everyone can just kind of give a virtual round of applause for our 3 panelists here. They've done such a good job. We appreciate having you guys out there. Noon and GU are both great partners of ours. They're going to be on course. Rayleigh's is a great community partner of ours as well. They're going to be helping at the marathon as well. And so this has just been so great. So thank you guys for your time. That last question was, I think, a follow-up to you, Yvette, I think, when was talked about whole foods during the run for fueling, and you mentioned fruit, sucking on a grape, and a couple other things. And we are going to have fruit on course. The issue of fiber and just what that does to people's stomachs, just so you know, we will have porta potties on course at every aid station as well. But just kind of maybe address that, and from a fiber standpoint, using fruit as a fueling source. Obviously, the quick carbs are good from fruit, but what about the fiber piece?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's with having just those little bits, the nibbles of fruit as you're running, you're not going to get tons of fiber. The fiber is going to be on the skin of that fruit, but you're not going to get like 20 to 25 grams of fiber to cause a GI distress usually, but once again, individualized. But typically, if you are just going to be nibbling on a little bit of the fruit, whether it is bananas don't have much fiber on them, but even just a little bit of oranges, or even the grapes, things like that, the carbohydrates are going to probably affect more than something like dietary fiber would on a GI distress level. But once again, it is training to kind of figure out those ones that are easy to pack, easy to chew and eat while you are training, and then what really is working for your body. But usually I wouldn't see that the dietary fiber is going to affect with the amount you're going to be eating while running.
Awesome. Thank you. And again, thank you to our panel. And also, one thing I forgot to mention, our next CIM University is going to be in October. And so check the date on that one. And the topic for that is going to be managing the aches and pains of training. So an injury prevention, we're going to have some physical therapists in. They're going to kind of help you with that part of it as you kind of get into those longer workouts and longer runs, just kind of managing those aches and pains and helping you get to the start line healthy. Thank you guys again to our panel. Thank you to all of you guys who participated and were here. And again, this will be on YouTube in case you missed anything or want to go back and write it. I took great notes and it will be on our YouTube channel as well. Again, thank you guys for a great evening, and we look forward to seeing you October, and good luck in your training, and we'll see you on the start line.